Welcome, and thanks for making time to attend this session, and I hope you'll find it useful. So before we start, let me see a quick show of hands. How many of you have file servers that have unstructured data where you don't have any visibility into the data, what kind of data it is, who put that data, who owns that data, whether it's a low business impact or high business impact? Wow, everyone in the room. And you know what? I'm not surprised because we have the same situation too. So for the same data, how many of you in your organization have one or more compliance requirements to meet? And you just need to put controls around it. And it could be a regulation like SOX, or it could be a standard like PCI DSS in payment card industry, data security standard. Or it could be a best practice like COBIT, MOF, or you're just trying to effectively manage your data. Most of you, right? I mean, you are doing for a certain reason. You don't know structured data and you want to manage. So cost of managing that data is pretty high, right? And risk of not managing that data is even higher. So if probably you heard recently in the news was Sony, it was sued for security breach. Their PlayStation network got hacked, and their personal data got stolen, like email addresses, credit card information, names, addresses. And that's huge. That's pretty huge, right? This is where my group, my team comes for help. So I'm Gunjan Jain, and I'm a program manager in Solution Accelerator team. My group develops solutions in compliance space, mainly with the focus of shifting the burden of processes and people to technology. With me is co-presenting Neer, and I'll let him introduce himself. Neer?
Hey guys, can you hear me well? Excellent. So I'm Neer Ben Zvi. I'm a program manager on the Windows Server team, and I deal with data management, especially on file servers and unstructured data. And I was one of the core team people that built the file classification infrastructure in Windows 2008 R2. And now what we're bringing to you with the help of Gunjan's team is a solution accelerator that helps customers better deploy the technologies that we've delivered in Windows Server 2008 R2. Now, today's session, we'd like to talk to you a little bit about what we see as challenges in data compliance and managing of unstructured data on file servers. We'll also touch a little bit about I'll give some points about SharePoint. This is not a SharePoint session, but I'll kind of talk about the relationship a little bit because it's interesting, file servers and SharePoint. We'll introduce the data classification toolkit. This is the first time we're showing it. We're very, very excited about it. Gunjan and I have been working on it for more than 6 months now, and we believe it's a great product that you'll be able to use, and Gunjan will talk about it at length. And then, of course, we'll show the mandatory demos of how it works to kind of make it real. The main objective for us for this session is for you guys to walk out and be able to understand that it can be done. You can manage unstructured data. As long as you set your goals, you don't set your goals too high, you can actually manage it pretty effectively. And as a bonus, you can save your organization a boatload of money while doing that. So we'll get started with that. Of course, we'll also have time for questions at the end, and we'd welcome a lot of questions. So let's talk about the common challenges. So first of all, I've been in this area for at least 5 years now. I've been talking about the same things again and again and again. Data is growing on file servers. Data is growing at a 50% year-over-year rate. It's not going down. If you look at the files across your organization, almost 80% of it is on file servers, while around 10% is on SharePoint, and another 10% is on other products. The data is distributed to many, many places. With the globalization of today's era, we see data across multiple countries, data across multiple tiers from the desktop through the data centers, through the cloud. It's just everywhere, and it's very hard to control, and it is a huge risk factor for organizations. So we get a lot of questions about how can I move my data to the cloud? What do I do with my desktops? How do I manage all this unstructured data? How do I manage my risk? Usually, we now see a big trend of folks coming and asking their IT to comply with regulations. Now, the main thing is that governments have started to really put pressure on organizations to be compliant. Now, your CEO or your CIO needs to sign on the dotted line that is compliant, and that has a lot of different aspects to it. One major aspect is what is done with the data in the organization. Now, that CIO would go to the IT admin and ask him for help, or to consultants and ask for help, and that IT admin is stuck with the problem of how do I go ahead and tell my CIO that my servers are compliant. We have the same problems in Microsoft IT. We work with them almost on a daily basis to help them get structure into their unstructured data. We actually, with Windows 2008 R2, we were able to take 100 terabytes of data that we have on file servers and classify them so we can find the high business impact data and then appropriately protect it so that they can sign on the dotted line that they are compliant. We recently did a project with the finance department in Microsoft that had specifically payroll information, how to protect that. We're actually going to publish a case study about that fairly soon. It will be on the FCI website. But eventually, this is all coming from businesses that need to be compliant. They spend a lot of money on auditing. Before we did what we did with the finance department, they used to spend 2 weeks' time of a full-time employee every quarter to just get a report done of what's going on their file servers. That's like $50,000 a year. And just for that department, which is like, I don't know, 20 people for this specific IT shop. Okay, the other question people ask me, okay, I want to be compliant with my data. I'll just move it all to SharePoint. Now, SharePoint is great. I love SharePoint. If I could, I would sell you SharePoint all day long because it's a very, very pristine product. The main thing is that you can't just take 80% of your data and just dump it at SharePoint. It's not going to work. People have tried it. I can tell you from experience, it just doesn't work. And we'll talk a little bit about that afterwards when we get to another slide, but there is no place that I've seen that doesn't have both SharePoint and file shares. So the problem is not going away by saying I'm going to move it all to SharePoint. It's going to be there, and you need to also manage your unstructured data as well. And we're here to help you with that. You don't need to do something complex. You just need to manage it so that you can actually get your risk and compliance intact and make sure that you're doing the right thing. So with that, we'll kind of start talking about how do you start doing that? How do I start managing my unstructured data? And really, the trick is to not go and say, okay, I'm going to have a comprehensive plan that will take 10 years, and I'm going to go and execute it, and it's going to cost me $5 million to do it. The trick is to start small, do it on one department, another department, start where the pain is, and then move upwards to get more of a baseline across your organization. Once you have it on one department and everybody can see how it works well, it's very easy to get to the baseline. If you don't have it anywhere and you try to deploy it everywhere, it's just not going to happen. So let's talk about the players a little bit. I mentioned them. Really, the players in this area, when you talk about unstructured data, the interesting part is that, or both unstructured and structured data, there's the same players. You have the CIO and CSO. They know about the regulations. They know about what's called the control objectives. And they need to sign on the dotted line that everything is OK. And they might go to jail or might get fined. So they're really worried about that. So they're kind of going to the IT admins and IT architects and say, I'd like to be compliant. Here are the regulations. Here are my control objectives. Please go ahead and do that. Now, IT admins and consultants can actually do pretty cool things. You can configure the systems to be appropriately protected, BitLocker on the machines, make sure that the machines are well protected, there are firewalls and everything is patched and so on. However, IT admins do not know what to do with the actual data inside the file shares or even SharePoint. That's because they don't know what's in there. The only people that know what's in there are actually the folks that own the content. So we call them the content owner or the content stewards, whatever you want to call them. These are the guys that actually control the file shares, what's put in them, or the SharePoint sites, and they know what to do with the data. The finance department in Microsoft knows where the global payroll data is going to. They know that it's there. So they can actually know what to do with that data. The IT admin doesn't know what this data is and what to do with it. So that's kind of like a conflict that we need to bridge somehow. And then last, the information workers and the employees, they don't care about compliance. They just want to do their job, and they want compliance not to be in their way. So if we can get somehow all these players to work together, then we can actually get to a pretty good system that allows you to do more data governance and control the risk for your unstructured data. So now I'm going to talk about SharePoint. Why is it that people really like SharePoint, especially IT admins and business owners as well? It's because the business owners that control the data also control SharePoint. So basically, the IT admin says, you business owner, here's the site, you can create the site. Thank you very much. You need to make sure you sign a dotted line on this site and make sure you manage who can access it and manage everything on the SharePoint site and manage all your retention and everything that you need through SharePoint. So SharePoint shifts the responsibility of who needs to manage the data, from the IT admin to the actual data owner. And that's a really, really good thing, because now the data owner knows what the data is, has the tools to manage it. On file servers, it's the IT admin's job to manage and configure. The data owner can, at best, just configure who can access the data. So this is why SharePoint is so successful when it comes to compliance. However, if you want to move everything from file shares to SharePoint, you need to have the data owner own up to moving it. So projects that have been successful in being able to move files from file servers to SharePoint to clean up the file shares were projects that were done in cooperation with the data owners, and we're actually asking the data owners to move their most recent data to SharePoint so that they can manage it there. Projects that I've seen that were not successful are projects that were just automatically uploading data and expecting the data owner to take responsibility. Still, as I said, while SharePoint is a great tool, we know, and we should take it as kind of like effect for the next 10 years at least, I assume, that you're going to have a boatload of files on these file servers. It's going to be costly to manage them, and if you're not proactive, it's going to be potentially very, very costly, both to your organization and to the IT admins that own it. So there are two approaches I see people doing today. One is, we'll just throw more disks at the file server and kind of ignore it. When I talk to many people I talk to in the industry, and even people that came to the booth, I asked them, okay, so what do you do with compliance on file shares? And they kind of said, oh, well, we're not doing anything. The best, like the ones that are furthest ahead told me, we apply BitLocker on the file server so that, and as you all know, if I apply BitLocker on the file server, it's very good protection against the disks being stolen, but that's basically where it stops, right? So people use that as an encryption mechanism, which is great if the disks are getting stolen, but still anybody can access these files or can do whatever they want with the files. The potential hit, Gunjan talked about Sony, but there's probably a lot of cases where you can hear about potential hits where information was stolen. The British government a year ago, they lost like a third of their citizens' personal information in an Excel spreadsheet, and all these kind of things are really happening to people. And the more data you have on file servers, the harder it is to do e-discovery if file servers are involved. So all this bulk of data, you need to somehow be able to take hold of it, manage it, and simply reduce it if you can, because most of it is actually stale data. Numbers are around 80% are stale data on these file servers. Of course, nobody wants to delete it because nobody wants to delete their files in case there's some very important file that they missed, but that's why backups are there as well. So kind of like the way we look at things, try to get insight into your data along with the business owners, like the finance department or the HR department that own the data and the share owners. Really, it's a partnership. It's not, you can't do it by yourself alone. Once you do that, there's very, very simple things that you can do. Encrypt the data is a big part of compliance. Like all HIPAA data needs to be encrypted. You're basically 90% of the way there. Retention, retain the data. So in Microsoft, we try to now go and do retention schedules for data so that we have retention for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, depending on what the data is. That helps us get rid of huge amounts of data. Just huge. And reduces our e-discovery risks and our all other risks. In Microsoft, at each point in time, there's thousands of people under e-discovery holds. So think about how much data it is for them. So if we keep all the historical data, all this is still relevant for the e-discovery hold. If we reduce the data because of retention schedules, then we make our life very simpler and we save a lot of money. So with that, what we kind of did, we have the last thing I wanted to say before we move on is that, again, start small. Start with one place. Identify the one department that really needs it. Start there with their file shares. And then a success story will help you leverage what you did to really apply this across multiple departments in your organization, multiple file shares, and really get things cleaned up. It's really about maturity of the organization and seeing what other people did in order to be able to take that into the next level and apply it across all your file shares. So with that, I'm going to have Gunjan introduce the data classification toolkit and show you how we help you actually manage the unstructured data on file servers.
Thanks, Nir. All right, thanks, Nir. He outlined a lot of problems, challenges that we're facing today, right? So let's look at some of the solutions, the technologies, or something we're coming up that can help solve some of those challenges that Nir described. So let me just see a quick show of hands. How many of you are familiar with Windows Server 2008 R2 file classification infrastructure? Couple of those, right? Couple of those folks, not all of them. So the approach we take, let's talk about the approach. What is the approach we're taking to solve some of the challenges we have with compliance, information governance, effectively managing data? It's a two-step process. Classify the data, what kind of data it is, apply policies based on the classification of data. Sounds ridiculously simple. It is ridiculously simple, but that's exactly the crux of it is. The premise of this, the premise is, once you've classified the data, you can invest based on the business value of the data. You're not just putting all the investment in, which is low business impact. So for that, you need to classify the data. Once you know what kind of data it is, you can effectively manage your cost and risk. So it's really a two-step process. How do we do that? How do we do that today? So I was talking earlier about, like I was mentioning about file classification infrastructure, short for FCI. That's a technology that exists today on Windows Server 2008 R2. How does it actually work? All classification and policies, how do you apply those policies? So on FCI, there is a way to tag your data, the file, using properties. Think about, you can apply, you can define policies, tags against your file data. So example would be, you can say business impact, and it can have a value of high or low. How do you classify that data? Now, how do you make that value something high or low? It's based on some rules. So rules could be location-based, where you can say, all my data shared on finance server in this location, this folder, is high business impact, HBI. Or it could be based on content, where you can say, oh, go open that document or data, look for social security numbers or things you are interested in. And let's say if social security number is found, you want to tag that data HBI. Another example would be, if the data has not been touched for 10 years, it's a low business impact. I want to categorize as a low business impact. So those are some kind of rules you then define. And that's like automatic classification, location and based on content. And there's a way to do manual classification too, but let's hold on for a minute. Now, once you have classified that data, you want to apply policies based on the classification. And those policies could be driven by security, the access controls you want to put, or compliance requirements, where SOX may have some retention policies, or it could be just you want to effectively manage the data. It's not been touched for 10 years. I want to expire it, or I want to back up to some backup location. So all these policies, how you can do it today? Using file management task. So again, the FCI on Server 2008 can read the data from file shares. It has a classification engine. It uses rules to classify the data, applies the right tags, and uses file management tasks to apply the right policies. So in this case, if it's a high business impact, I want to say RM is protected because it has social security number. Or if it's a low business impact, I want to move it to archive. I want to expire that data. So you can do that today. So where does data classification toolkit comes into picture? What I just showed you, it's there, right? This is one of the solution accelerator my team is working on. How does it help? Many of our customers, actually one of the customers we recently worked with, they ask us how I can easily deploy it. So there was one engagement where a friend from Windows File Server was working with, and he says, oh, this is a great fit. I want to use FCI to classify my data and apply right policies. Oh, can you let us know what the properties I can use? I said, yeah, it really depends what you want to define in your organization, what the requirements are, all right? So 3 months of engagement, at the end of engagement, we didn't come up with a good set of properties. So they didn't have a good starting point. So they're still stuck, okay, I need to do this, but I don't know how to classify, what properties I need to use. So this is where the data classification toolkit comes for help. So it provides knowledge out of the box. Knowledge meaning the properties, the rules, and the policies, the task that you can use today, and you can just apply to Windows file servers. So that's one of the value prop. Second is, why are you doing that stuff? Again, like I was mentioning earlier, you have some compliance requirements to meet. You want to map it back to some regulations. So this is where the data classification toolkit integrates to IT-GRC solution. IT-GRC, who are not familiar, is in information technology, governance, risk, and compliance solution. So our team, Solution Accelerator team, also built an IT-GRC solution on top of System Center. I will talk to you a little bit in the later presentation today how we do that, but I would not have enough time to go deep into this. But if people are interested, we can come to the booth and I can explain to that. but it does provide to IT GRC integration so that you can map back to the compliance requirement, all your classification and policies. And finally, how many of you have single file server? Probably none of those. Like in Microsoft, we have hundreds. One of the gentlemen I was talking, Mercel, they have 145 branches in the bank, Rabobank, and then 25 in the main branches, so it's over 150. So more often than not, then you have hundreds of file servers in your organization. So you need to define those classification properties, rules, the way you want to classify the policies consistently across file servers. So this data classification toolkit, Solution Accelerator, helps you do that quickly. So you can consistently apply those across. And finally, once you have classified the data, you've applied the policies, you want to get visibility into the data, right? So this is where the reporting comes into picture. You can produce report across your file servers, your hundreds of file servers, and say, oh, it will help you answer that questions like, this server has my PII data. This server has confidential data which shouldn't exist. Or this server has data which is secret data, but it's not been encrypted. So things like that. So you can get a reporting which can work across file servers to help you answer those questions or validate what you have done, which you can share with auditors to say, oh, you are doing what you're supposed to do too. So like I mentioned, we ship knowledge out of the box. So some of the questions we get asked, what is the development approach for the knowledge? How do you come up with what you're shipping out of the box? How can I trust that? So there were two goals that we have in mind when we started this project. One, we wanted to keep it simple. Simple, like imagine if you, as an IT pro, if you have to classify data based on hundreds of properties, it's going to be a management nightmare. It's going to be a management nightmare. Before we started this project, Microsoft IT was just using 2 properties, really, because it's easy, it's less cost. We want to reduce cost, not increase the cost. And second, actionable. So once you have classified the data, you want to do something about it. So you want to make sure they're actionable once the classification happens. These are the 2 goals. And again, how did we come up, and I'm going to share you what kind of knowledge it looks like. How did we come up where we are today? It's authoritative, and probably you're aware of, they're like hundreds and thousands of regulations in the whole world. So there's no way one company or even Microsoft or anyone can come up with one set which can help all the regulations in the world. So we scoped it to 5 most asked regulations or authority doc that's asked by customer. Why those 4? Because they are most commonly used. It's like an 80-20 rule. You can look at the classification requirements for this document and extend to other regulations. So the ones we chose was for the health industry, HIPAA, HITECH, SOX, and PCI DSS, privacy requirements, and the NIST, US government, 860. Now, once we have looked at the compliance requirements, the classification requirements for those, we harmonize those sets. And harmonize meaning, again, it's like a deduplication efforts. An example would be if you want, for a US privacy law, you want to classify data based on PII, personally identified information, and pretty much any privacy law in the world, like European Data Protection Law, or anyone in the world, you want to classify based on PII, and similarly for PCI DSS standards. So you'll have that property once. So we will harmonize it, come up with a generic set of values that will apply to multiple regulations. So that's what harmonization means. And then we worked with customers who are specific in these industries and tier 1 auditors to validate our approach and make sure this is in alignment what they think of it, whether it works for their organization or not. So what does it look like, properties? So this is what it is. This is the properties that we are shipping out of the box. They are 14 in number. Are they simple? Yes, it's a small set. It ranges from information privacy to information security to records management, and it's for unstructured data we are talking in, right? Can it be extended? Yes. It's not fixed. Can it be customized? Yes. So let's say if you have a regulation and say, oh, this is a great set, but I have this specific requirement where I need to classify on this property. So yes, it can be extended. But it's a great starting point. I mean, now talking of the same customer, you could just given this toolkit and they just have this data out of the box and they will be ready to just jumpstart on this project. So they have very good start for that one. So, so how do we actually use it? I mean, these properties and the reporting infrastructure, multi-server. So let me show you through some of the demos and scenario I'm going to walk you through. So the scenario I'm going to walk you through is, if you're not tired already, I work for a consulting company, which is an online order application business, and we accept credit cards. So if you accept credit cards, so you have to meet requirements against PCI DSS, payment card industry, and that's one of the very common requirements. Now at the board of director and CEO, the audit committee level, all you care about, like what Neer was mentioning, is you're compliant against those PCI DSS, right? They don't care what needs to go underneath. So they care about regulations, those legalese. At the CIO, CSO levels, they want those legalese to be mapped to the control objectives. Think of control objectives being the goals that we need to achieve in order to meet those compliance requirements cited in those regulations. So some of those requirements on PCI DSS are, the objectives are around classification and how you're going to handle and protect that data. So data handling. So those are some categories that you have in controls. Now at the IT pro level, now CSO said, oh yeah, we need to meet those control objectives, but IT pro level, they have to go and execute those things. So this is where the control activities come into picture. So control activities are a set of tasks or activities you need to do in order to meet those goals. So in this example, in this scenario, for data classification, for PCII, I need to classify data containing PII, personally identified information. Like the Sony example I was giving, right? They have a credit card information stolen. So I need to classify data. It's a PII data. It cannot leak from the company. And second, once you have classified, you need to apply policies. In this case, I'm going to RMS protect that data which contains PII. So, so in the first scenario is, I'm going to take the control activities part, how we can implement using file server classification, FCI, and the data classification toolkit. So here, I'm going to act as an IT pro who needs to implement controls for PCI DSS. I'll create a classification baseline with the rules, policies, and properties, import on a single file server, classify the data, and apply the policies, the control activities I was showing earlier. So let me switch to my demo box. Let's see. Yeah. You can see in the back. All right. So what you're looking at, for the demo, I've set up, let's just talk about these 4 machines. So I have a client machine, Windows 7 client machine, and 3 file servers. For this demo, I've only set up 3 servers, but obviously you can extend to 145, hundreds or 1,000 servers. And let me go to file server 1. So those who are already familiar with, let me just go here. Sorry. So we are already familiar with FCI, and it's nothing new. But who haven't seen it, FCI is a part of Windows Server 2008 R2. So once you have file server, you can enable a feature called File Server Resource Manager. So once you enable that feature, you have FCI available with Windows Server 2008 R2. So it's there today. What does it have? It has something called classification management, where you can define your properties, classification properties, the rules, the way we want to classify the data, and the file management task just below it. So in this server, right now, I just installed it. I don't have anything fresh, or I may have a stale data. It doesn't matter. So this is my state of my file server. And I'm going to switch back to my client machine. So on this client machine is where I have data classification toolkit installed. So data classification toolkit is, again, it's not part of Windows 2008 R2. It's a separate download, a solution accelerator, which is free, that you can download and install. Install where? In any of the machines, any of the client machine. It doesn't need to reside on the file server. So in this demo, I've already installed data classification toolkit. Let me show you what kind of packages it comes with, the knowledge it comes with. So you can see all in the back, right? You guys, okay. So you see, when you install this toolkit, you have all these packages. So we have one specific for each regulation that I mentioned. I mean, it's in the scope. And also, it's a main harmonized package, which is, you can have, this is a harmonized package in the sense, although it's mapped to those 5, but it can be actually mapped to other regulations as well, because it's not specific to one particular regulation. So it's a harmonized package. So this is the knowledge that we ship out of the box, which contains all the rules and properties. And then when you install this data classification toolkit, it comes with a set of commandlets, toolkits that an IT pro can play with and schedule or automate through group policies. So here's an example. Let me show you what are the different set of commands that it comes with. So some of the commands it comes with is these sets. So you can clear the server, like you can make it clean, reset it, compare the classification packages, the state of one server against multiple servers. So you have a baseline server and you have other like hundreds of servers. Are they still compliant in that state or not? You can search, and we'll talk about search. You want to discover what the file servers are in your organization. You can, there's a couple of commands to collect the reporting information. And you can import the classification knowledge into a server or export it. So in this example, I need to apply PCI controls, right? So I'm going to do, so I'll say, okay, the import command looks helpful. So I'm going to do, so what import does, it imports a collection of classification rules, properties, and tasks. So property, rules, and tasks you're familiar with. Reports is the report jobs that runs in the background and collects the information, what data has been classified, what task policies have been run. So what we have done, we have defined a schema, a standardized package, which will, this command will let you import that package. And we are already shipping that package, right? So I'm going to use this command to import to one of my file server, which is file server 1, right? What do I want to import? PCI DSS package, classification package, right? And there is an interesting concept of scope. So scope, if you mention, there's all file servers. You can't expect file servers to have the same set of shares, right? The finance server probably will have finance share. HR share will have HR shares, right? No two servers will have the same shares. So what this allows you to do, it will allows you to scan dynamically what shares, the user's shares exist on the file server and add it to the scope. So dynamically scope. So in file server 1, you have finance shares. So it'll say, oh, it will find it's a finance share, and I want to scan on finance share. Find all the data which is PII. So it dynamically finds your shares and adds to the scope. So this is configuring the file server 1. And by the way, it's doing all shares. Let's say if you want specific scope, the scope meaning on the shares you want to run classification, apply policies, you can specify by saying, oh, explicit. Now once it's done that, let me go back and what it did to my car file server. So I'm going to go back to file server 1 and let's refresh it. Okay, so it imported the properties, the ones I showed you, the ones that are only applicable to PCIs. And similarly, it imported rules that are associated with those properties and policies that are in that package for the PCI DSS. And also, just for the completeness, it has a report task as well, which will run in the background, collect that information, what has been done to your server. So let's go and look at one of the classification property. Let's say I need to customize it, right? This is something that comes out of the box and I need to do something about it. Let's say I'm going to work on the project because projects is pretty much company specific, right? And I'm in control, so I have an order app, which is a project, and then an HR web, and then FinWeb. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying I want to define a tag, and I want to, which is project, and I want to classify data based on that project. So I want to define these files belong to people who work in the order application. These files belong to who work on the HR web application. So classifying based on the project. So this is, I did some customization here, and I'm going to also, let's say, for clearance. So clearance is one of the another out-of-the-box property where you say what kind of clearance you require in order to access certain data. So out of the box, you can have restricted internal use or public. And I say, oh, for my company, I want to have another level of clearance to access the data, which is partner. So our partners, they will get a certain type of access rights. So I add a partner level. And then let's go and look at the PII, because this is, I'm going to demonstrate. So the PII property has different values. It can have a high, moderate, low, public, and not PII. And again, this is what we're doing out of the box, but it's no way fixed, right? Say I'm good with that. So what I'm going to do here, I look at the rules that are associated with that the PII property. So some of the rules here, they talk about, let me just zoom it for the folks who can't see. It says set PII to moderate if PAN number is found, or some the credit card information is found, or social security number is found. So let's look in one of those. So let's say I pick the PII set to moderate when the data contains MasterCard information. So in this case, earlier I was mentioning about like how is a content classifier and the location classifier, right? So you can classify based on location or content. So in this case, I've done content. But if you had the folder classifier, you can say anything on this share, like on a finance share, is PII. But in this case, I want to be very specific. I want to look at the content and say, if the MasterCard is found, I want property to be assigned high, which I just missed it, or what? It should be moderate. Huh? Yeah, I may have changed it because it should have been moderate. Yeah, it's moderate, so I must have changed it. So how did we come up with these? Again, we work with GRC experts in our group, and we looked at those regulations, see what does it prescribe you, what does it provide you. So let's say I'm going to enable these rules. This is my test server. I want to say anytime I find the social security number, the credit card information, I want to set PI to moderate. So let's look at some of the policies that we have. So one of the policies that we have is, sorry about this, RMS protect the moderate and high PII. Remember, the PI has different values, not PII, public, low. So we don't want to RMS protect that. We want to protect anything which is moderate and high category. So in this task, the condition is anything where PII is greater than low, it's not a public, it's not a low, or it's not a PII, we want to RMS protect it. And further, for optimization, what we have done is, if it's not already protected, which means the date encrypted does not exist. So if you're already encrypted, you don't want to just re-encrypt it, right? And if it's encryptable, maybe it's not encryptable. So you want to check that whether it's encryptable or not. So based on these conditions, so right, you see how the policies are being defined? You can define certain conditions, right? In this case, I'm showing PII, but you can have confidentiality or any of the properties you have defined. And based on those conditions, I'm applying some action. In this case, I'm applying an action to RMS protected. Now, let's go, let me enable, by out of box, we disable this because we want to test it first in organization. So let's say I enable this RMS protection. So I enable all the rules to scan PI data. I enable rules for RMS protection. Let me go back to my client machine. So that was on server, one server. Let's see, I have this data. This data, credit card spreadsheet. This is one of the typical examples where company might store the credit card information in Excel. Well, people do that, right? I don't know whether you like it or not, but people do that. So this is an example. We have the MasterCard information with some customer data and credit card information on MasterCard. So it sounds great, and for some reason I thought it's a great idea to share on the card5 server. So I'm going to go and share on the finance server, right? This is card5 server where I applied those policies. So here's what I'm doing is I'm taking this credit card information spreadsheet, copying on the server, file server data where I have rules and policies defined, right? Let's go back to the file server. So for this demo purpose, normally what will happen, these rules and policy run on a scheduled process. But for this demo purpose, I want to show what it does when it has a chance to run. So I'm going to run this policy right now and wait for task, the RMS policy, the file management task to complete. So let's run this policy now. Somebody from the client machine shared some personal information, data with personal information on the server, and running that policies. And normally what will happen in real scenario, there's a schedule. It runs on a schedule basis. It scans and does on a schedule basis. So let's give a few seconds, and now I just finished doing that policy. Did I not enable it? Hang on, it looks like it didn't find that file. I'm sorry. Let me check. You heard about demo gods, right? Okay. Sorry. I'm just wondering whether I have access to RMS server. It does. Okay. I'm going to go back to Corp. Yep. Let me try again. Sorry. I did enable those. Okay. Let me try one more time. I'm not sure what I changed. No. Even then, it's not encrypted. It should encrypt it. But even if it doesn't work, I have a way to show you, because you always have a backups. I don't see any reason why it won't work though. Let me just go back. Sorry. So I'm going to go back to my backup server and see, because I'm thinking there's a issue with the RMS server. All right. This might be a little slow because I'm connecting to my COD server, my dev box, but it's pretty much same environment. So if you can see, I have the same environment which I used to create it. Same environment, so just to prove you guys. And I'm going to go back to my Win7 client. Quickly import it. Company name, Corp1. And then minus all shares. So I'm just repeating those steps. It doesn't take long for me. All right. I'm just going to add one for just demo. You guys know about what I'm talking about. And I'm going to re-enable those rules. PII. Maybe I did the confidentiality. I'm just wondering. Did I do the right rules? Now it's going to bother me. So it's PII rules. I did that. I re-enabled it. I'm going to re-enable the, I'm wondering whether I did the confidentiality rules. The RMS protect, enable rules. So I do the same steps, and then once it comes back, I'm going to go to, give me a second. I don't want you guys to just scrolling around. Let me just TS into again. Okay, it's kind of slow. Okay, we're back to this. Now I want to show you that thing, right? So I'm going to go back to my demo, and I'll try to do one more time. And put it on the Corp FS1. What is server name? FinData. So I'm going to put it here again. And let's see if the demo guards are with us or not. Sorry, I'm going to go back to server. Sorry for moving around. So I'm going to rerun that task, right? So at this point, expect it to RMS protect. And if it doesn't, believe me, it works. So it's probably the RMS server, because I have RMS server, I didn't show you guys, but it's just contacts RMS server and gets the certificates to protect it, but it does work. It was working till 8 a.m. in the morning. Yes? Yes, yes. So the scheme on the PCI, while it's doing that, you saw that when I imported it, there were a set of properties. So those, when we looked at the PCI DSS, those were the specific compliance requirements around the classification. We took those data elements and map it here. So you can take that for the PCI. Let's say you have to do, well, not HIPAA, high-tech is a different example, but say European data protection law. So you can look at those, are they still applicable? That's fine, because PII, for example, or you want to do on confidentiality or business impact, but can get rid of the other ones and customize it. Does it make sense? Oh, you want to see the list? Okay, oh, definitely, I'll go through that. So now you believe me, right? I have one file. For some reason, this RMS server didn't contact. So what it has done is it has RMS, I ran that task, it has RMS protected that one file. This is on one file server, right? And man, I hate this scrolling around. This is where I don't like. So it has RMS protected that credit card spreadsheet, right? So let's see if I still, it's just if I faked it, let's go back to my, and this I did not set up for the resolution, so that's kind of look funky. Okay, go back to client. So now as a client, I'm going to try to open this one. So you can see the same file is now RMS protected, right? And it's going to ask me for the credential to see if I have access right. So I've created an account for myself which has access to these data. So I'm going to connect to the server, and you can see I have specific permissions right. In this case, I've given all to myself. The other thing I want to show you, which is cool, is you see it's an Excel document, right? You can go to the advanced properties and see on the custom properties how the data, let me just zoom in a little bit, how the data has been classified. So you can see the personally, it's not the stretched out properly, but the personally identified information is moderate because it found that MasterCard. The date encrypted is today, and the RMS encryptable, the conditions I was showing you is yes. So it sets it, next time I run it, it would not try to do it again. That was the whole idea of these ones. So this is end of my first demo, and let me show you this lady, the properties. So these are the, let me just zoom in a little bit. So these are the properties that we are looking at. Yep. Yes. Yes. So I'll show you afterwards. If let's finish the demo and the presentation. If it doesn't address, and definitely I'll be here for a little while. So I did some customization here. I added, I mean, of course, I can add another property or whatever we want. And I'm going to go back to my presentation. Let's see. So the next scenario I want to show you is, you saw how VRM is protected one. So if you have to do the same thing on a multiple file server, right? Rarely you have one file server, correct? So what I'm going to do is export that baseline. Let's say I have the baseline. I customize with my department names, addition clearance, and added new properties. I export to an XML and apply to all servers, multiple file server. That's the multiple file server support is. So I'm going to go back. Oh, sorry. Okay, so yeah, this is fine. Oh, sorry, I didn't switch back. So I'm on this this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export to from this server, which is my baseline server, to a file. This is my baseline for PCI and export it. So while it's doing it, it's just getting all the configuration and putting on my this local folder. If you look at it, it's simply a human readable XML format. So essentially, ideally, you can just edit the XML file if you want to create a baseline. But normally, you would do through a file server. So once I preserve that baseline, I want to be able to import to multiple file server. So there are multiple ways to do that. How would I know what file servers I have? So one of the commands that we have is search. What it allows you to do, it allows you to discover file server in your organization using System Center Ops Manager, Operations Manager. So I mean, I can talk to you if you don't know about System Center, but that's one of the ways to discover the file servers. Another way is some of the IT organization, like in MSIT, they use their servers list in a custom database. So you can use this command to discover for servers from a custom database. Or in this demo, I don't have either of those, so I'm going to use my text document where I have other two servers' name. It could be Excel file as well. So I'm going to take that as an input. No, just, oh, sorry, get content. So I'm going to take this as an input. So this is my file, which has two servers, and import it. So I'm piping it to import command. File classification. So computer I'm getting from the list, and path is my baseline. Contours, so baseline, and the scope is again all shares. So this is going to scan for shares on the server. So it's uploading the same baseline to server 2 and server 3, and it could be a long list, whichever source you want to be. So while it's doing that, so I'm going to skip, I'm going to go back to server 2. Let me go to server 2. So it was empty, and I'm going to refresh. So you can see the same data that I had customized got imported into those servers. So essentially, with the single command. You just configure all the server the same way you want it to be. And the third scenario is, it depends. So on your main test server, when I did it, I enabled some of those. So it's whatever state you have exported, it's exactly preserved the state. So I didn't want to have it enabled in the beginning because you're testing it. We don't want out-of-box enabled. Once you test it, you enable it, you export it, and import it all the servers. So finally, I talked about reporting. So once you applied the baseline to all file servers, you want to validate what has happened, what policies have been applied. So I'm going to go back to my client. Again, this is all client, right? I didn't have to do anything on the server. I have, oh, sorry, I just keep switching, and I think I'm demoing this. So I'm going to go to, this is one of the reports that we ship out of the box. So what we do is we have this task report jobs that I was talking earlier, which collects the data from individual file servers. We collect into the centralized database, and you can connect and produce whatever reports you want. In this case, you have a report which says you want to see the distribution of data. This is the number of files, how they are distributed. Okay. How they are distributed as per PII data. So let's say I need to find distribution of data based on confidentiality. So I can say, oh, these are the many files that you have on each server, and server B's, like details you can find, the PII data on each server, how much you have. So you can find the distribution of data as per on particular classification. So this is those kind of things. So it helps you answer questions like, do I have a PI data on a particular server which should not exist? So let's say the corp PS2 file server should not have a PII data or confidential data. So you can see how much data is there. So you can answer those questions. So some of the other reports are the file management task, which correlates to the policies. So policies, right? So in here, you can say across all file servers, what are the policies have been executed. For in this demo, I built the data for how many files have been retained for midterm. That one of the policies I had. How many have retained for the long term? How many have been RMs protected, which has a high business impact. So you can answer all those questions across file server. It's an aggregated view. And one of the gentlemen was asking that they have one of the problems where they need to know who owns that data, what types of data it is, which office files are. So you can answer those questions using data by owner, what are files who owns that data, or by file groups. So you can see the distributions of data by file groups, what kind of email files, the office files are there, and you can define those type of groups as well. So the way it works is, when I ran that report, the classification and apply policies, that information is collected by FCI and puts into the reports, individual reports. So what data classification toolkit does, it goes and scans each server on a scheduled basis and collects that into SQL database. And let me show you how it does that. I have a perfect slide for that. So let me go this.
It uses reports that we have in the box in the file server resource manager that provide reports on file types and owners based on the, as you said, based on the properties of the files.
Yeah. So the FCI looks for the properties of the file. It puts on the individual servers. Data classification toolkit, which is add-on, looks at individual servers and puts in the database. So in the first step, you saw that you configure as an IT pro under classification toolkit from a client to multiple servers. Once the classification policies are applied, the data is collected from individual servers into the central database, SQL database, and that's also an optional component. If you don't want reporting, you can choose not to set it up, but it just helps, right? And then as an IT pro, you can create those reports, or you can send to auditors or CS or COs, whoever you want. So you have, yes, so that also is included. So if you have, there is a report called by users. So you will see a report by user. For example, Gunjan has 100 files on this share, and Neer has thousands of files on this share. So you can see distribution by users as well. Yes? Owner.
It would be the NTFS owner of the file.
NTFS owner. All right. So let me just go back a little bit. So remember the scenario initially I was describing, how the IT pro will implement the control activities. This is what I just demoed you, using data classification toolkit which sits on top of FCI, Windows Server 2008 R2. It's an add-on, and it's a free solution accelerator. You can just download, and it's for you to use. What I did not show you, how it ties back to IT GRC solution, integrates to IT GRC authority documents and control objectives, the mapping of compliance requirements. So just in the interest of time, we wouldn't have enough time to show, but I want to show you how it fits in the big picture. We have a IT GRC process management pack, GRC solution that sits on top of System Center Service Manager. So what we do, whatever the data, the policies and classification we apply, we tie those policies back to regulation. In this case, PCI DSS, and objective being data classification and handling. So it's like, and as a CSO, the persona being CSOs and CIO, I want to get a report on whether I'm PCI compliant or not, whether I'm doing these control objectives. I would have to use, so I could use, not I have to, I could use the IT GRC solution. Is it required if you don't have System Center in your, no. It's optional, because the demo we just saw, we didn't have System Center components. But does it make a better solution? Yes. So with this, I'm going to hand over to Neer. He's going to talk about, like I was talking earlier, we were working with Tier 1 auditors to validate our approach, the taxonomy, and we've been working with KPMG closely. So he wants to share some of the perspective from KPMG's perspective.
Yes. Thank you, Gunjan. This was a great demo. So really taking it back, we've been discussing the need, why we need to be able to get a hold of our unmanaged data and start making sure that we're more in compliance, that we reduce our data, amount of data, so that we save cost and risk to the organization. Then Gunjan has showed you how the data classification toolkit with FCI allows you to do it across all your servers in the organization, and actually bring you the knowledge that we already collected for you, so that you have a baseline to start from. And of course, you can extend that baseline. As the lady asked, you can have additional packages that you get, either that you create yourself or that you get from additional consultants and auditors. And this is really where we worked with a few Tier 1s, auditing companies and consulting companies, to kind of gauge how they would be able to best leverage what we're doing. And as you probably are aware, they're looking at a much bigger span of what is compliance and information governance. So either it's KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte & Touche, and so on. Some organizations would prefer to go and hire their services in order to get compliant, and some would just go and do it themselves. Either way, whatever you choose, we believe that there's a good path with the technology that we are delivering. Now, the way they look at the world is more of I would say, a bigger picture, because they need to be able to help the organizations with their full compliance requirements. And compliance on unstructured data is just a part of it, as we all know. So kind of like to show you the view of how they're looking at it, if you look at how they're looking at information governance, it touches data classification, it touches privacy, security, data flows, and so on. The key thing is that data classification is really a cornerstone to be able to enable all these processes, because once you identify the data and you're able to know what the data is, you can actually then apply the right security to it, you can apply the right retention, the right data flow analytics, and so on and so on. So this is really how they're looking at the problem, saying, okay, if we can actually identify the data, then we can help the organization be compliant with how they're handling the data. And There's an example of a case study that they were kind enough to share with us. They didn't use the data classification toolkit, of course, because it was not out when they used it, but it really is a great fit to show you how an auditor looks at a problem presented by a customer, which was in this case in the consumer product, a big consumer product organization or corporate that used KPMG to be able to identify the data that it owns so that they can measure the risk and make sure that they have the right processes around this data. So what's next from what you've seen? Really the call to action is we're going to release the data classification toolkit beta around the end of May. So you'll be able to download it and use it in your test environments. We have the link further down the slide deck. You'll be able to kind of take it from the slide deck as it comes online. And then we're going to actually release the toolkit in beginning of Q3. We encourage you to go and test it. And again, as I said, it all starts from a simple implementation. When you play around with it, you take one department, you implement there, and then you go on from there. The power of showing how this works is just something that cannot be replaced. And starting from small and then branching out is really the way we found people to be very successful, so that they can really show the value that they're bringing. Some customers saved 60 to 80% of their cost by just expiring data, which is a very, very simple thing to do, even without classifying the data. So start small, don't go set your aims too high, and then you'll see how you'll be able to leverage all the technologies that you see here within your organization or organizations that you consult to. There are a few other sessions that are relevant around solution accelerators and the file services. I really recommend going to the file services consolidation technology. It's a very, very cool session that shows a lot of demo and configurations of file servers that may meet your needs with the latest technologies there. And of course, we will be in the booth all day long, today and tomorrow. So you're more than welcome to come and ask us any questions that you have. If you want to ask questions, this is the time. So go ahead. So the question is whether this is applicable for Exchange. Exchange has something called transport rules that you're able to apply some regular expressions to, and you can use similar things there in transport rules. By the way, thank you guys. The guys are leaving. Thank you for your time, and if you can fill in also the evaluations, that would help us a lot, especially if you give us good grades.
And I do want to mention something. I'd have to interrupt. The demo, I was just checking. I just enabled different rules. So I'm just bothering me.
So in this presentation, you see we have the sign up for the beta. If you'd like to sign up, we're more than welcome to get you some more information, as well as our emails that you can get to us through. And I think you're getting some very cool prizes if you fill the evaluations. So.
But don't ask what it is in the middle, because that's a surprise.
And that's for the evaluation. So any questions?